Finding Home by Sapphire. Chapter 14. To relax or to not relax. Harry was back on his feet within the next few days, although the usual lethargy he would feel after death sent him back stayed with him for twice as long. Unfortunately, Tony had noticed this, which meant all the other Avengers also knew this, and Harry had quite a bit of difficulty getting time to himself. He had wanted to return home immediately, but no one would hear word of it, and Tony had been inordinately pleased at being universally agreed with for once. So, resigned to spend at least the next week at Stark Tower, he had given Natasha a key to his house so she and Clint could pick up his things. Somehow, this 20-minute retrieval had turned into a 6-hour trip when Clint had found Harry's no longer magically hidden basement and called him immediately to make some time with the motorcycle. Harry had agreed, and he hadn't seen either one of them again until that evening. Inside Stark Tower, repairs had started at last. Once Tony had realized just how unorganized and easily distracted inventor, a still recovering wizard, a scientist who still had bursts of anger management issues when aforementioned wizard wasn't around, a demigod who couldn't tell a phone from a fax machine, a super soldier who found literally all the technology in Stark Tower a novelty, and two master assassins who were better at breaking things than fixing them could be. He had called up Pepper and begged for her immediate return. So Pepper had come back, promptly returning some order to the chaotic mess inside Stark Tower. The entire team had been impressed with the secretary's efficiency and had no problem obeying her orders when she directed them to different parts of the building for maintenance. 4 days after Harry had woken up, his magic had finally settled enough to work properly, and Tony had very nearly cried when Harry had walked into the penthouse one morning, waved a hand, and the walls and furniture had all began fixing themselves. By late afternoon, the penthouse was as good as new. But while repairs were being made all over Manhattan, and Stark Tower was no different in that respect, any stranger walking by the place would most likely wonder at the most obvious change to the building. Or, rather, the people within it. Where before they had only seen Tony Stark, his secretary, Pepper Potts, and a handful of other employees coming and going from the building, now there were 6 other people, each noticeably different from each other, coming around the place more often than the repairmen working on the ground floor. It had started with Bruce Banner. After learning that Harry would be staying at Stark Tower for at least a week or two, he had finally accepted Tony's invitation to move in. And as the billionaire had promised, he had felt right at home in the tower's labs, not even needing to worry about losing complete control again, with Harry so close at hand. Consequently, this had also placed Harry, Tony, and Bruce all in the same area, and Fury had swiftly hoisted the study of the Tesseract on them, giving orders that a teleportation containment device was to be made in conjunction with the cube. This had led to Thor sticking around more often than not, stubbornly insisting that he was simply observing the progress they were making with the Tesseract, while he spent most of his time there helping out with maintenance, exploring Tony's empire, and taking most of his meals there with the 3 scientists. Then there was Steve's sense of responsibility. The super soldier had claimed it was his duty to assist with the repairs as well, his superior strength coming in handy when Harry wasn't there to levitate something. With how big the tower was, that was actually a lot. But the captain had also ended up staying for dinner one night. A storm had rolled in, and Tony had generously offered up another guest bedroom. Somehow, Steve had neglected to vacate the tower since then, and the billionaire had conveniently forgotten to kick him out, so the arrangement was settled. And, of course, with her correspondence with S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha and Clint also came around more often, apparently in charge of giving frequent updates to Fury, only to find their way to the weapons room and the garage, respectively, and spending several hours experimenting. Seeing no need to go out for food, when there was plenty at Stark Tower, they had also stayed for breakfast and lunch, and needless to say, Tony had invited them to dinner as well. So, one way or another, the entire team had found their way back to the very place the Battle of New York had ended in, and everyone had pretended not to notice the glaring fact that Tony, with the Russia-sized ego Stark, had yet to put his name back on the tower, even though a wave of Harry's hand would fix the damage in a heartbeat. So, the A remained. And the city of New York, whispering of monsters and heroes, some believing, some not, wondered exactly what had taken place during the alien invasion. Hey, Stark, this one says you were rock climbing in Alaska when the whole invasion took place. Steve announced from one of his chairs in the lab as he scanned the latest newspaper. Says that your arrogant attitude and flair for dramatics wouldn't allow you to stay silent if you really did have a hand in stopping the attack. Steve looked over at the billionaire with a grin. Well, what do you know? A tabloid I actually agree with. Tony shot him a wry look before pulling out his phone. And here's one that says Captain America doesn't even exist in this day and age, and that even if he does, he is nothing but a war hero long past his prime and should be looking into retirement. Tony looked up again, smug. At least I was rock climbing in Alaska. You don't even exist, T-Rex. Steve scowled and leaned back in his chair again as Tony smirked triumphantly and returned to his work. He and Tony had reached something of an understanding after the war, and their bickering was always taken with a pinch of salt now. If you two are finished flirting with each other, mind sending me the next set of calculations, Mr. Stark? Bruce's polite voice came from across the room. Tony sent him the data, along with a very giant and happy face as he peered over the top of one of his computer screens at the scientist. I did not need that mental image in my mind, Doctor, but I suppose congratulations are in order since you actually managed to give Gramps over there a heart attack. Heart attack was quite a bit of an exaggeration, but Steve was certainly more than a little red as he spluttered wordlessly at Bruce. If all three of you are finished acting like children, Thor and I are going to do a food run at the Quiznos down the street. Anyone want anything? Harry stood in the doorway, Thor at his shoulder, looking mildly amused at the exchange. The lab's occupants sheepishly gave their preferences. Steve last, after going over the menu Harry produced from thin air. Right, Harry said briskly as he turned to go. We'll be back soon. While Harry was technically going to Quiznos, he was also making a detour before that. Why does your brother want to see me again? Harry asked as they made their way down one corridor of the grounded helicarrier. Fury had decided to use the helicarrier as its main base from now on, just in case another incident like Loki occurred again, and they would be able to react much faster, especially since the Avengers were now literally a call away.
Well, he did not state he wanted to see you in so many words, Thor hedged, but he implied it. Vaguely.
Harry gave him a sardonic look. So, basically, he really didn't say anything of the sort, but you decided to bring me over here anyway. Thor blinked, and then shrugged.
Basically.
And at Harry's sigh, he added,
But I do think he wishes to see you. He is my brother. I know him better than anyone. Even if he doesn't say it aloud, I can guess quite accurately.
Harry said again, but nodded nonetheless. Let's just get this over with then. He wasn't particularly looking forward to a conversation with Loki. For one, even though the demigod had been stupid enough to try the whole world domination thing, he was actually a pretty smart individual in general. The problem here was that Harry couldn't really remember what had been said during his last moments alive on the balcony, only that Loki had been the last face he had seen, the last person he had spoken to, before he had lost consciousness. He fervently hoped he hadn't given away anything too important.
In here.
Thor led him through a door and down to a glass cell, much like the one S.H.I.E.L.D. had placed Loki in the first time. As Harry stepped into the room, eyes adjusting to the brighter lights, he noted that there was actually a chair and a bed inside the cell, as well as a side door that probably led to a bathroom. Comfy, Harry observed dryly. Absolute paradise compared to last time. Loki's equally sardonic voice agreed as the side door opened and the demigod himself stepped out. Hello again, warrior. I see my brother was telling the truth. Your recovery is truly miraculous. The version they had all agreed on, and one that Thor had anxiously pressed Loki to stick to if asked, was that Harry had been badly injured during the battle and had spent a week recovering in Stark Tower. Knowing how protective Tony could get over Harry, it hadn't taken a lot of convincing on their part to get Fury to believe it. And once Fury believed something, the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D. pretty much followed without question. Leave us, brother. Loki continued as he waved a dismissive hand. I see enough of your face every day during your normal visiting hours as it is. Thor just released a long-suffering sigh before glancing at Harry, though a smile lurked just behind his eyes. Harry nodded, and the demigod left the room, leaving Harry alone with Loki. So, Harry drew closer, conjuring a chair from thin air before setting it in front of the glass cell. I hear you wanted to talk to me. Did you? Loki sounded faintly amused as he sat down as well. And here I was under the impression that you wished to talk to me. They stared at each other for a moment before Harry snorted and Loki shook his head. It seems my brother simply wanted to acquire company for me. Loki arched an eyebrow. Though why he thought bringing you, of all people, here would be a sound idea is beyond me. Beats me, Harry settled comfortably back into his chair. But now that I'm here, we might as well kill some time. How are you? I hear you weren't injured, but Agent Barton's not your biggest fan at the moment. Loki blinked at him, that same searching gaze Harry remembered the demigod giving him before he had been injured surfacing again. I am uninjured for the most part, he said abruptly. You know of my heritage. A war against humans would hardly deal damage to my person. Right. Harry shifted a little, feeling slightly embarrassed. He knew that from Thor, of course, but it had seemed only polite to ask. They fell into a noticeably awkward silence, as neither were terrific conversationalists, nor were they accustomed to making idle small talk. Surprisingly enough, though, it was Loki who broke it first, expression determinedly indifferent, even as he asked, as strange as you humans can be, I do wonder if all of you have that distinct lack of self-preservation you showed during the battle. Harry flushed a little, but he flicked up a few privacy wards around them, just did gaze, before answering steadily. You would have died if that staff had run you through, even if you are from Asgard. I wouldn't have. Didn't, obviously. I highly doubt anyone else would have saved me, even if they knew they wouldn't die. Loki pointed out sharply. Thor would have. Harry immediately refuted, frowning when Loki scoffed. He would. He loves you. Before I talked to him, just after the Chitauri came through and we were all at my house, Mjolnir stopped working for him. He paused for a moment when Loki's eyes widened. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to save Earth, but he wanted to save you more. I think he was planning on simply grabbing you and the Tesseract and somehow returning home, regardless of what would happen to this world. Earth means everything to my brother, Loki said in a clipped tone. He would never have... But you're his brother, Harry said resolutely. Family. There was never a chance of him leaving you behind. Something flickered across Loki's face, an emotion too fast for Harry to identify, but he knew the demigod believed him. Very well, Loki continued stiffly instead. Thor, I understand, but you, I do not. We were enemies. Technically, at that point we weren't, Harry pointed out. Semantics, Loki dismissed impatiently. We were strangers then, circumstantial acquaintances at most, yet you... I take it you're not sorry, Harry interrupted. Look, it wasn't as if I stopped to consider whether or not you were worth saving. I did it because you were clearly in danger, and it wasn't as if I really ever considered you an enemy in the first place. I promised Thor that we'd save both you and the Earth. Kind of pointless if you ended up dying right after you came over to our side. And it isn't just you, either. If some little girl or a random stranger on the street was about to be shot or cut down, I'd do just as much to save them. Loki was silent for a long while after this, and Harry stared back stubbornly, refusing to let the demigod believe he thought his own actions to be wrong. Tell me, warrior, Loki finally said, would that stand true for all people? Should Earth be threatened again, you would fight to the death, if need be, for random strangers. Don't know about the death part. Harry tried not to let the bitterness seep into his voice. But yeah, I suppose I would. I'm not someone who would just stand by while someone is killed in front of me. Then why do you not join the Avengers? Loki challenged. My brother has told me of your numerous refusals to officially ally yourself with S.H.I.E.L.D. Harry shrugged. I don't like following anyone's orders, and Fury would be able to send me on all sorts of missions if I join. No, I'd rather just help out when a real crisis comes around. I don't have the best experience with adhering to organizations. Again, Loki considered him with assessing eyes for a long minute, before finally gesturing around them. No one can hear us? Harry blinked at the sudden change in topic. Yes. Can't see us either. I could walk across the room, and they'd still see us sitting here. Loki nodded, leaning forward with a more somber expression this time. A word of warning then, warrior. There is a being in this universe. He goes by the name of Thanos, and he is the one who provided me with the Chitauri army. Beware of his cunning, his intellect, and his thirst for war, for he is approaching, and not but the strongest will be able to stop him. Harry gaped at him for a moment before demanding, Wait, are you serious? Why are you telling me this? You didn't even want to talk to me in the first place. What if I hadn't agreed to come? Loki shrugged. I had not decided until this moment to reveal this threat. While I no longer wish to rule this world, I am not my brother either. If this planet burned, the most I would feel is passing regret, as it seems you provide the only minimally intelligent conversation I have come across in years. Harry wasn't sure if he was supposed to be offended or not, so he ignored this and pressed. So why now? And why me? Loki tilted his head. I am not certain either. I was not certain earlier. The Tesseract's energy was interfering with my senses, but I am quite convinced now. You have Death's mark on you. Harry instantly froze, mind already racing to find a way out. How did Loki know? How could Loki know? Thor didn't know. Did he? My brother does not know, Loki assured him, and Harry guessed some of his panic must have appeared on his face. He has never held much stock in sorcery, but I have spent many years studying it, and there was only one other being so touched by death, rumored to be legends only. They call him the Master of Death. Would that be you? Harry knew Loki had to swallow a triumphant smile when he winced at the accusation. Do not worry, warrior. Only the most adept at magic can sense it, especially since I have come across it before. Before? Harry stiffened. On Thanos? Loki nodded. Both of you have shaken Death's hand. Both of you know Death like no one else. Thanos is a titan, fascinated with nihilism and death. There are whispers throughout the universe that he has even fallen in love with her, and she is the reason for his destructive rampage. He kills many, all without mercy, perhaps to impress her. Death is a she, Harry said faintly. Well, you learn something new every day. His gaze sharpened. But if he's coming here and you obviously had no intention of telling anyone, why tell me? You should know I'll tell the Avengers. Do what you will with this information. Loki rose to his feet, half turning away. But I believe it will be interesting. The demigod's eyes glinted. Two beings touched by death, standing on opposite sides of the battlefield. Death's master against Death's champion. I wonder who will remain standing in the end. Harry stood up abruptly, swallowing hard. He had fought basilisks and dragons, acromantulas and dementors, dark wizards and a dark lord, and now he could even claim to have faced extraterrestrials. And always he had come out on top. But somehow the prospect of facing this Thanos, also touched by death and quite probably liked by her more, he wasn't sure he could win. Thank you for telling me this, he said abruptly, turning to leave. An immediate scuffle from inside the cell made him look back, and he just managed to catch the flash of alarm across Loki's face before it was hidden away again. You were leaving? Loki asked, and Harry was struck by how alone and caged the demigod must feel, never seeing anyone save his brother a few times a day, and perhaps a S.H.I.E.L.D. employee who delivered his meals. Perhaps Thor had made the right call in tricking Harry here. I'll be there to see you off when you and Thor head back to Asgard. Harry offered a slight smile. Loki nodded, and Harry made to leave once more when the demigod spoke again. I will see you again after that. Perhaps one day. Harry paused, contemplating his options for a long moment before making up his mind. A secret for secret, even though he knew Loki would most likely never tell anyone what Harry was about to show him. He turned back fully, strengthening the wards around them before letting his animagus form take over for a few seconds, enjoying the astounded expression on Loki's face as he dropped a single feather on the ground. Here. Harry picked up the feather as he changed back, laying it flat on his palm as it burst into a ball of ghostly blue flames, disappearing and reappearing inside the cell with front of Loki. The demigod plucked it out of the air after a hesitant pause, an almost reverent look in his eyes. Harry smiled again when Loki glanced back at him. I promise, Harry told him, nodding at the feather. I'll definitely see you again, even after you return to Asgard. And Harry knew Loki believed him. We should go for shawarma tonight. Natasha raised an eyebrow at Tony's suggestion as she swallowed another bite of her sandwich. Really, Stark? I thought you were joking. Do you even know what shawarma is? Do you? Tony countered, unperturbed by the lack of enthusiasm all around. No, exactly, which is why we have to go try it. The teleportation device is almost finished, and Thor and his brother have to leave tomorrow. There won't be another time, so it's tonight or never. I will never! Clint mumbled around his sub. Shawarma sounds like some branch of yoga, not a food. I mean, if you've never even been there, how do you know it's a restaurant? I've driven by it before. Tony leaned forward. So how about it? Shawarma for dinner? Gradually, grudging consent was given from the rest of the team, if only to stop Tony's wheedling. Satisfied, the billionaire finally turned to their unofficial Avenger. Harry, shawarma, it'll be fun. The restaurant's not even one of those extravagant places you hate so much. Harry? The wizard started a little, turning startled eyes at Tony. He hadn't touched his lunch. Harry looked around distractedly. Shawarma? Sounds good. Great. He cleared his throat and pushed his sub away. Look, I think I'm going to have a bit of a lie down. Didn't get much sleep last night. Just wake me before dinner. Flashing what was probably supposed to be a reassuring smile at them all, Harry rose and disappeared from the room, footsteps quiet as he hurried away. Tony waited until Harry had gone before rounding on Thor. All right, what happened? Thor blinked at him, though there was worry lurking under his confused expression.
I'm afraid I do not know what you mean.
Tony scowled. I usually send Pepper or one of the grunts around here to get me food, but even I know a trip to Quiznos doesn't change someone into a walking zombie. He's been out of it all day, so what happened? Thor looked down at the table while the rest of the team stared at him.
I took him to see Loki,
he finally admitted. There was an immediate reaction. Tony's scowl darkened. Clint, having just taken a sip of beer, inhaled at the same time and ended up choking on it, and even Bruce frowned. Pounding Clint on the back, Steve demanded, Why would you do that? What did he say to him?
I do not know. Loki wished to speak to Harry alone, and Harry agreed.
And you just did that? Natasha glanced at the door Harry had left through.
They wished for privacy,
Thor said loftily.
And my brother would not hurt Harry. He would not even be able to.
How would you know? Clint asked, still a little red in the face. Your mother was hurting people not 2 weeks ago.
Loki owes Harry a debt,
Thor said sharply.
And he will honor it. I understand that a person's word is more easily broken here, but on Asgard a life debt is sacred. It is a promise, and only those without self-respect, without a shred of dignity, would disregard it.
This sufficiently shut them all up for a moment, but Tony spoke up again within seconds. Well, Loki said something in him. I highly doubt Harry would be this distracted if they were planning afternoon tea. Let's just wait until Harry tells us, Bruce suggested, reaching out for Harry's sandwich and heading to the adjoining kitchen to plastic wrap it. If it's something important, I'm sure he wouldn't keep it to himself for long. And what if he doesn't? Tony called after him. Steve snorted. Then we set you on him. There's only so much whining even Harry could take. He would tell them after Loki was gone, Harry decided as he flopped back on his bed. He knew Loki had told him all he knew of Thanos, and there was no point giving S.H.I.E.L.D. a reason to keep the demigod locked up for any longer than necessary. Before he had left, he had asked Loki to tell Thor once they went back on Asgard, so the Thunder God would know to come back. After some back and forth debating, Loki had sighed and agreed, leaving Harry the responsibility of telling the other Avengers. How many walls do I have to go through before I can finally get some peace? Harry asked the room in general. Not surprisingly, there was no answer. Here we are! Tony swept an arm at the restaurant in front of them. It looks great, doesn't it? It looks like a bomb site, Natasha pointed out bluntly. And indeed, the restaurant was almost half gone, though the part that was still there seemed to be open to the public. Don't be ridiculous! Tony led the way inside. Bomb sites don't have shawarma! The rest of the team looked doubtfully at each other, but 20 minutes later, they were seated around a wooden table, each with a plate of shawarma in front of them. Tony, of course, tried it first, while the other Avengers and Harry all sat back waiting for his verdict. It's... he chewed, and Harry swore there was a moment where the billionaire wanted to spit it back out. Different? This already seemed to put Natasha and Clint off the food as both assassins stared down at their dinner with wariness usually reserved for a nuclear missile. Steve mustered up his bravery next and took a bite, chewing as everyone else watched him with trepidation. It's not bad, Steve finally announced, taking another bite. Just a lot of meat. Natasha looked a bit sick. Fat? Some, yeah. Steve nodded, unconcerned. Natasha swallowed and continued staring at her dinner. Harry was beginning to feel a little sick himself. He was no vegetarian, but he was used to lighter foods, and this was so heavy it was visibly greasy. It's okay, I suppose, Bruce said as he munched on the shawarma. Thor was also chewing on one, an odd expression on his face. Harry sighed and picked up his. He had already paid for it, he might as well try it. It took one hard swallow and several deep breaths to not throw up after the first bite. Placing it down, he automatically reached for his water. Glancing up, he caught Natasha's eye, and she promptly lowered the shawarma that had been halfway to her mouth. Beside her, Clint was chugging down water like it was going out of style. Harry supposed that for someone like Steve or Bruce, or even Thor, the shawarma would be nothing to their systems, but he knew there was no way he could finish it. Looking around, he spotted Salvation across the street and looked back at Tony. Tony? He started carefully. Natasha and Clint immediately perked up hopefully. Yes, Harry? Tony asked in a strained tone as he finished another bite. Harry was silently impressed. There's a pizza parlor across the street, Harry pointed out, and even Thor brightened. Pizza was one of the foods the demigod knew and liked. What about it? Tony took another stubborn bite. Well, it's open, but it looks even worse off than this place, so it'll probably close soon, if only for repairs. Maybe even permanently, Harry continued. And Tony finally put his shawarma down, gulping down some water after it. And, well, Harry scratched his head. It would be a shame not to try it before it renovates, and I haven't had pizza for a month. Natasha instantly caught on. I haven't had it for 2 months, she announced, already half out of her seat. I can't remember the taste of pizza, Clint added with feeling, also leaping to his feet. And it would be so sad to see the place go without trying it first. Exactly. Harry beamed brightly at the rest of the table. So, Agent Romanov, Agent Potton, and I will just have simple pizza for dinner while you gentlemen wine and dine here. Don't get up on our account. And with that said, all three of them sped out of the restaurant without a backwards glance, leaving a very disgruntled Tony behind.
I believe pizza is what I would prefer as well,
Thor said as he lowered his half-eaten shawarma.
I have not had it since the last time I came to Earth, and I wish to eat it before I return to Asgard tomorrow. If you'll excuse me.
The demigod rose and disappeared out the door before any of them could call him back. The remaining 3 Avengers looked at each other. I think it's pretty good, Steve said after another mouthful. Beside him, Bruce nodded, completely serious. Tony looked from one to the other before releasing a defeated sigh and rising to his feet as well, pushing Natasha's plate over to them. Knock yourselves out, cast iron. I'm going for pizza. And then the billionaire hurried off as well, leaving 2 puzzled Avengers behind to enjoy their shawarma. Till later then! Tony clapped a friendly hand on Tony's shoulder as the Asgardian prepared to leave. Don't forget to write! Steve rolled his eyes and elbowed Tony out of the way to shake Thor's hand. Until we meet again. He glanced at Loki, standing quietly next to his brother, mostly unbound after giving his word that he wouldn't do anything dangerous. Be safe. Thor smiled, looking around at the team of humans he had become familiar with. All of them had come to see him off, and as his eyes landed on Harry, he wondered just how different things would be if Harry hadn't stepped in when he had attacked Tony, or when he had contemplated taking Loki and the Tesseract and simply left. He didn't miss the loaded exchange between the wizard and his brother, and his mind flashed back to the heaviness that had stayed with Harry ever since his conversation with Loki. He hoped it wasn't anything too bad, and that if it was, his brother would tell him soon. So with a slight inclination of his head, he held up the device now connected to the Tesseract, and felt a thrill of pleasure when Loki grabbed it without hesitation. As the cube's blue energy swirled around them, he wondered if Odin would let him come back, even if there wasn't a crisis about to hit Earth. He would certainly miss the company of these people. Well then, Tony clapped his hands together. Back to Stark Tower?
Don't you mean Avengers Tower?
Steve asked, amusement coloring his words.
You still haven't fixed it.
Tony waved a hand. Haven't had the time, and really, all that money... Potter's magic! Clint coughed, and beside him, Bruce couldn't hide a faint smile.
Would be a huge waste, Tony finished, ignoring the interruption. I might as well just leave it like that.
Whatever you say, Stark. Natasha brushed past him and headed for the shield-issued car with Clint. Clint and I will go report into the director... White. They all turned to Harry, who had been very quiet all day. They noted the tired bags under his eyes and the grim tilt of his mouth, and instantly straightened, giving the wizard their full attention. I need to talk to you, Harry continued. There's another threat coming to Earth. Very soon.